is Lagos, you probably had environmental. And so this is us just getting out of cleaning up and everything and trying to get into the real deal proper. So you're welcome to another session of the Triad Masterclass. And today we're talking about something that is quite, if I like, very, very topical and very top of mind for business leaders. And the question really is, risk management, governance, it's something I need to bother my mind with in this part of the world. And today we have two professionals that are going to help us provide some perspectives to this. I'd like to welcome Shina Balogun. Shina, of course, is a legal practitioner. He is the managing partner of Dement Legal Partners, and this is a commercial law firm. Shina has done the entire breadth of commercial practice in terms of law, and he comes to the table with a lot of experience, either on the side of governance, on the side of arbitration, on the side of transaction structuring. And so he's going to be looking at this conversation from different perspectives. We also have Olanike Olakonle. Nike is an assurance, governance, and risk management expert. She's worked in the industry. So we want to have a conversation from the two perspectives. I mean, the industry, in the practice of law, we want to be able to see things from the two sides of the coin. Nike has led assurance and governance and risk management, and even internal audit and controls in many conglomerates, Lafarge, Coca-Cola, GSK, even more recently in the oil and gas segment with ND Western. So we're very privileged to have these two people. So you're welcome, Shina, you're welcome, Nike. Because time is usually of the essence. Thank you so much. You're welcome. So because time is usually of the essence, I want to quickly dive in because I want us to provide time for people to be able to ask their questions. Please, you can start asking questions from the very beginning. You can drop your questions in the chat. If it's very strong and burning, just raise your hand and we'll find a way to land the conversation and bring you in. But before we go on, the question really is, let's start from the basics. What exactly is risk management? What is governance? Let's start with you, Shina. What are your thoughts? What exactly does these two buckets entail for business leaders?
Okay, thank you very much, Jumoke, and thank you to everyone joining this call. Let me start by saying that governance speaks to how corporate entities are, managed in a way that it sustains the corporate entity in itself. By saying that, I say who takes what decision? How does this decision, how is it reviewed? So if Mr. A takes a decision, who has, the upper level of review? Those reviews, are they subject to further reviews? Where there are conflict of interest issues, how is it managed? And then it also speaks to the ownership of the entity itself. Okay, who owns what? How do we manage this is my contribution to it. If we talk about third-party engagement, you are entering into contracts with suppliers, entering into contracts with other entities. How is this contract managed? What is my contribution? What am I doing? What am I not doing? What is expected of me? Where there are force majeure cases, what happens? So this, speaks to the general expectations in terms of the management. So it goes beyond the WhatsApp call. So it goes beyond, you are my friend, this is what we want to do. As a lawyer, I would always say that the court expects that it will take a decision based on evidence, and evidence are mostly documentary. So what are the documents, that speaks to the dispute, or what are the documents that speaks to the management of what we intend to do? How have we decided to? So it won't be your word against mine. Oh, I thought I said. I did not say that. Such issues are reduced or eliminated where there are proper, risk, let me call it legal risk management, and then proper policies with companies, with entities, what you need to do. Well, of recent, we have companies having SOPs so you know exactly what is expected of you whenever you have something to do. So I think governance and risk management speaks to proper management, elimination of risks to the barest minimum, when entities are involved.
Okay, thank you so much, Shina. Let me quickly cycle to Nike. And the reason I'm coming to you is Shina has said a whole lot of things. Some of it is still settling into our subconscious. A lot of it sounds like, oh my goodness, there we go again, these lawyers. And some people even say that risk management and governance is for the company that has chop and belly full in our Nigerian parlance. Should small businesses that are still trying to grow and scale, should they even bother? In your views, how does risk management sit with local businesses in an economy like Nigeria?
Okay, thank you so much, Jumoke, and thank you, Shina, for expounding on the definition of governance and risk management. So first of all, I would like to talk about risk in the basic form before I now start answering the question of should small business even think about it at all. So what is risk management? It's just saying how do I prevent something that will harm me? How do I prepare? How do I avoid surprises in my business? That's really it. How do I avoid surprises that can hurt me? How do I prepare for the ones that I cannot avoid? That's risk management in full blown, because those surprises are there, especially in this kind of environment that we are in. You wake up and then you have this new regulation that you didn't even hear anything about. It's affecting you, it just comes up and that's it. So how do I make sure that these surprises, and it starts from what is my business objective? That's the beginning. What do I want to achieve, right? So as long as you have a business and that business has an objective, then you need to manage risk. Simple. I don't need to be a big company. I don't need to be a multinational. I don't need to be making me. So even the person at the lowest level selling something and buying, typically we have a lot of people doing side hustles that now grow into big businesses. Even at that level, you need to start thinking of risk generally. So before we even go to the mid-size and all that. So that's the first thing. And so what is it really? I need to know what my key vulnerabilities are as a business. It's important, right? I need to know what my basic controls are. And I like how she now started in terms of how do I record ownership? How do we make decisions? Do I have clarity on who makes decisions and how the person makes decisions? So those are some of the things. So it's important. So for me, starting now, you don't have to be a big company. You don't have to be this large corporate or anything. It's very important to start thinking about governance and risk management from today, especially if you are building a business that will last. If you are not just building something that you just want to, after maybe a few years, you want that to be the end of it. So it's really key for business to think about, how do I run my business? And how do I make sure that I put controls in place to reduce mistakes and then think ahead? Importantly, do I have a backup plan? It's these two things that can help you answer some of these questions. Thank you, Jumoke.
Okay, thank you so much. And this brings me to something, at what point should I really, as a business leader? Because sometimes there are many moving parts in businesses in developing economies like Nigeria. Just when you're about to start to do something else comes up. You start your day being very, very conscious of the fact that you want to put the framework in place. Then life happens. And before you cycle back again to that conversation about putting in a framework for risk management, 3 months have passed. And the more you try and do it, the more the risks are getting to crystallize. At what point, and how do you practically, as a business leader in a climate like Nigeria, put a risk management framework in place? It's as simple as saying, how do I become disciplined? I know. From your perspective.
So how do you put it in place? For me, the first thing is even awareness that you need to have it. That's the beginning. That's the beginning. And I like to say that as human beings, we're managing risk on a daily basis. It's just that maybe we're not managing it in an informed way. That's the only thing. We are managing it, you know, every single thing that you do, somewhere at the back of your mind, you are considering, okay, what could go wrong? Somewhere, at least as a rational human being, you are thinking that. So the first thing for the business is that awareness, and then starting now. So basically it starts from the first level, I would say, is governance. How do we want to run this business? That's the basics of risk management. If you cannot even get your governance right, then we can't start talking about risk management in the first instance. So first of all, how do we manage this business? Who is responsible for what? So you need to define clearly what decisions, and I like to talk about the what I call the 3 C's. And that's, for example, let me see if I can remember them. I like to talk about compliance. How do you make sure that your compliance is in place? You don't need to put everything in place from the beginning, right? It's to ask yourself, okay, what's my compliance like? The second thing that I like to talk about is also contracts. How do I ensure that I have the right contracts to manage my business? And then the third thing is cash. Because a lot of business cannot run today because they don't have the right cash. So I'm giving you the basics, right? Starting from beginning, because some people might say, okay, I don't want to, start, having this old framework, this enterprise risk management framework. I don't want. So first of all, start with the governance at least start with that. Put the right governance structure in place. The governance in terms of how you manage your financials, and financials, please, not only recording things down, also look at your cash. It's important. Those are some critical areas to look at. Look at your cash. Have a structure in place. Who does what? Is this business only about me? Is this business only about me? And then who can challenge me? So I'm going now to, starting from the bed, this is just the basics. I don't expect mid-sized corporates to be on this basic level. My expectation for mid-sized corporates is at this level, if you've gone ahead and you don't have all this in place, maybe get someone to come and help you assess and put a structure in place to manage this. And it doesn't have to be an expensive structure. What we try to do is to find a fit for purpose structure. But in the first instance, if you don't have anything and you're just growing, then think of some of these basics that I'm talking about. What's your governance like? Who is responsible for what? Who makes the decision? Do people know? Do people have the right clarity about what you want to do as an entity, and who can make that decision? So let's give an example. You're a one-man business, right? You're running the business, but you also have people working with you, right? Do they know that there are certain decisions that they need to come back to you? Or do they have an understanding of who is responsible for what? And then when you bring up something, okay, we want to do this, do you sit down alone and just say, this thing I want to do, I'm just going to brave it? Or do you go back to ask yourselves the question, what can go wrong? These are the basics, right? So I always have it at the back of your mind. What can go wrong? And, interestingly, I'm going to bring a small part of risk management that we like to debate a lot. And that's that, is risk really only about bad things? Is it only about threats? But as you sit down to ask yourself what can go wrong, you also begin to identify opportunities. So I'm not only focusing on the threats. As you begin to see what can go wrong, you also begin to now say, okay, based on this that can go wrong, there's this opportunity that I can trigger. There's this something that I can put in place and all that. So before I go on and on the base level, have your governance in place, document, have clarity on who approves what, have a process to check whatever decision and whatever thing you want to do, to ask yourself the question, what can go wrong? Am I prepared for what can go wrong? And what is the level of risk I'm willing to accept? Then we can now start getting a professional in place to help you build a framework that can work for your business.
Okay, thank you, Nike. You've actually spoken a few things. Okay, I was actually going to come to you, so Chino, just jump in, and then I would ask a question afterwards.
Okay, so I thank you very much, Nike, for that. I just wanted to add to all she has said that the basic underlining idea behind governance is accountability. So these structures are put in place so that the entity itself can be accountable. You can trace from one level to the other. If at the board level, what do you take to the board for the board, to give decisions over? At the management level, who are the people accountable at different stages? So in addition to that, the underlining, is accountability. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, because I was actually going to come to you, but thank you for bringing up that issue around governance is accountability. And I want to ride on that to ask you one or two questions. I recall back then I used to crack a joke about somebody being chairman, damaging director, because everything starts and ends with them. Now, most people in this part of the world think, look, my business is my business. Why do I need to have a board of governance? That's first question. Second question for you, Shino, is that people also say, look, you don't have to have a statutory board of governance, but you can have an advisory board. How do these things play out for a new business leader or a business leader that is new to the conversations around governance? What do you think?
All right. Okay. Let's start by answering the question, why do I need? So essentially, business starts with one person, maybe two people, three people coming together. We have this idea. We want to grow this idea, right? And then as the business, as they start, putting the work in, they see that there are things that they require, possibly outside of, the reach of the founding partners. It could be knowledge, it could be contacts, it could be industry experience, some things. And then if you have growth in mind, if you have legacy in mind, there is no other way to go, than to consider, having a structure that makes you accountable. Because really, that's essentially what we are talking about. So the need is for you to, I say jokingly that actually having a board is leverage, because what these people you are bringing together, as a board have in experience, what they have in contact, what they have in, whatever sphere that they've, worked in, they are bringing it to bear to grow your company. So, the popular saying that two heads are better than one is just, works in here. So if you think legacy, if you think growth, if you think expansion, there is no other way to go than, bringing good heads together, to guide in managing and, growing the affairs of the company. And so on your question, whether you consider the advisory or the statutory board, let me start by saying that there are sometimes we confuse, the usage of, advisory board, statutory board, and then at the end of the day, we find people saying, I have a board. And if you look at it, all the people there, they are just advisory. But let me start by identifying the characteristics. For an advisory board, they do not have, like the name suggests, advisory. They only operate in an advisory capacity. Their decisions cannot bind the company. And again, they don't have a fiduciary relationship. So whatever happens, really, there's nothing, they take it as, it's advice. So another distinguishing factor is like the advisory arrangement is governed by contract, while the statutory arrangement is governed by law, right? So if you have a director appointed based on the provisions of CAMA, that is governed by law. That director knows that is bound by the general decision of the company reached at the board meeting and a resolution is being produced. And then where there are elements of fraud and all of that, he is bound by it. But an advisory, director and our advisor would only say, oh, I advised and then I have no, duty. But what the benefit of this is, you can consider the fact that you can have a mix depending on the size of the company. I usually advise, depending on the size, you can have advisory board as well as statutory board. Yes, statutory board is complex sometimes, given, the mix, but if based on the size of the company and how you can implement it, you can have people who serve as advisors, and then you can still have the structured board. It doesn't have to be as large, to start with. But as the company grows, you need to grow your board to the size or the expansion of the company. But starting with, you can have maybe the founders, basically, and then you have a company secretary. That way, that accountability that we keep talking about, it's there, because the minutes of the meeting of a statutory board, it's a legal document, while the minutes of the meeting of an advisory board is an advice, to the board itself. So, but where you have the mix, of both, you can still have that small lean structure and then grow it over a period of time. But don't confuse the fact that you have advisors and then you have, a full board, like that, in that manner. So to a large extent, I would advise a mix, and then you expand the board based on, the growth of the company per time. But importantly, you bring in people who their skill, their knowledge, their experience would add critical value to your board. Not just, I want to have a board and then you have people on board. What experience do they have? What value would they bring to the table? How useful will be this value to the stage of the company and then the growth of the company? Those are critical things to consider. I don't know if I have been able to answer.
Thank you, Shina, you did. I'm coming back to you. There's a question in the chat room, and I want to throw it at Nike first so that she can help address it. But I'm coming back to you, and I want us to be able to look at, because when you talked about getting people of repute, people that have the right skill set, then it brings up the question of the responsibilities that these people carry. And how do businesses, number one, give comfort, business leaders, to people they want to bring onto their board? How do you mitigate the risk of being on the board of a company because you want to add value to that board? But I'll come back to you. But Nike, there's something you said about risk management being also opportunity identification, right? I'd like you to expound a little bit on that. But before then, I have a question in the chat room which says, within the governance structure of a business, please elaborate on backup plan mechanism. Okay. And we'll now take that question of risk management and opportunity identification. Thank you.
Okay, clear. And I think, thank you for the question. This question is probably coming because I said, as part of your risk management or doing your risk assessment, you're asking yourself, what's my backup plan, right? Should something go wrong? Really, it's all about saying, first of all, I want to take this decision. I want to take this business move. Let me look for a very practical example. Let's say I've been running my business and I want to diversify, right? I want to go into a separate business line. I have in my current business line doing well, perfect, doing all this, and then I want to move into a different business line. The expectation is that you ask yourself, what can go wrong in this process? And should things go wrong, what is my backup plan? So that's why I'm coming to backup plan. Should this business not succeed, what am I going to do? It's important, especially if you have investors. So that's the backup plan. So it's building additional controls in place. Okay, so I want to go. Okay, so maybe I've been. So let's go into maybe the fashion line. Before now, what I've been doing is I've been doing what you call bespoke fashion. Because that's one thing that's very simple. So you call me, you say you like this design, I make this design for you, and then we move on. And then I've grown my fashion line. And then I see that the next best opportunity is to go into the ready-to-wear business, because that's where, it's quick. I've done my assessment. People want this today, they want it tomorrow and all that. Then as I begin to do my risk assessment, I ask myself, okay, to be able to meet this ready-to-wear, it means I need to produce this clothing, and I need to keep them at home, right? And then so that when people, I need to stock them is the right term. Then the question I'll need to ask myself is, should people not buy this? What is my backup plan? Do I have a plan in place to, to be able to take this that I've produced, to also be able to convert it to revenue one way or the other? Maybe it's not 100%. Maybe I'll still be able to get about 50% of what I've invested. So that's what I mean by having a backup plan as you do your risk assessment in place. Let's go into our normal corporate. And I like the COVID example a lot, because it's something now is with benefit of hindsight, right? We've moved on. Everybody's almost going back to the office. But remember then when it happened, right? Some people could never have imagined that their staff would work from home. Not in any world. It was just not, especially in Nigeria, it was just not something to consider. They were very irresponsible. We don't trust them. They'll be going up and down and all that. And because of that, right, the system was built in such a way as, yes, we had our laptops, great, we would come into the office, but you didn't have the ability to say, okay, should people not come? Should we not be able to work in the office for 2 weeks? What are we going to do? But remember, most companies had BCP. They had business continuity plan. And one of the things in that business continuity plan is telling you that should this site not be available. So everybody was already aware that there was something that could happen. It's just that we didn't take it. It was just like, okay, yes, I've documented BCP. Should this building not work for 2 days? I will do this. But a lot of people did not test that. So in that situation, my backup plan is that should I not be able to come to this office, there should be somewhere else that my people can work from and be able to connect to the network and all that. Those are just very simple examples that we can relate with. So backup plan is really to say, okay, should this direction that I'm going on, should it not work? What are the actions that I can take? Backup plan also means that, do I have enough shock absorber to absorb this shock should something go wrong, right? And that speaks to a resilient business. Am I able to take this shock? So should something happen and still keep running? A lot of business are not able to take some shocks because they've not thought about it. But if you think about it, then you can find a way to be robust enough to take that. I hope I've answered the question on backup plan.
Yes, we have. Except, of course, the person that asked is going to ask a follow-up question, but we'll be on the watch out. But please go ahead with the risk management and opportunity. I like that.
Opportunities and threats. Okay, that's the one that I get a lot of questions on. And so risk management is asking yourself what can go wrong, and then putting controls in place to prevent those things from going wrong, right? We seek to, so I'll try not to do too many technical terms. We seek to manage the likelihood and the impact of it should it go wrong. That's what we seek to manage. So we seek to influence that. How do we, prevent this thing from happening, or reduce the likelihood of it happening, or how do we prevent the impact? In that whole process of thinking, in that whole process of brainstorming, what you will find is, as you start to look for other ways or controls, you open up opportunities for yourself. So what we tell people is, don't just focus on, okay, I'm managing this threat, I'm just thinking of controls. You open up other opportunities. Let me look for an example, because sometimes it's always good to bring it home with an example. So I look at the fact that, okay, I have a key man risk. I'm the owner of this business. I'm the alpha and omega of this business. I'm the one that makes all the decision and everything. That is a key man risk, right? So I begin to look at that risk. And in looking at that risk, I'm thinking, okay, so how do I mitigate this risk? How about I bring someone in that, that can be management, and then I stay on the board, right? So that everything is not all about me. In bringing this person in, then I begin to explore what skills do I need the person to bring on board, right? So I'm not just bringing this person in because I don't want to be the only person making all the decision. Then I start looking for opportunities of what additional idea can this person bring on board. That's the basic example. You know what? Maybe this person has some connections. So those are opportunities that I'm looking out for now from that person. What's the kind of technical skills in terms of this person expanding my business? So you would see that I've moved away from just managing a key man risk to looking for what additional opportunities these controls that I'm putting in place would bring to my business. So for us, when we think about opportunities and threats with regards to risk, is opening your mind to not only thinking about the threats, but identifying other opportunities that can come into place as you begin to manage these risks.
Thank you very much, Nike. You know, as I was listening to you, one thing occurred to me, that maybe not having a risk management mechanism in place is actually a lazy approach to doing business. That was my thought process, and no offenses meant. I'm taking this on board personally. And that is because sometimes when I stick with a unilateral way of going about a particular thing, it means that I do not exercise myself in exploring what other avenues are available, and that can actually shut me out as a business from things I could ordinarily go into. Again, case in point, when you talked about maybe key man risk, bringing in a new person, you know, trust issues and things like that usually keep Nigerian business leaders from bringing people that close. But the real question is, if you do your due diligence, if you have the correct value proposition, you might be able to attract the right kind of person that's complementary to you. Thank you so much. I will be back to you, but let me go back quickly to Shina. And sorry, Shina, for you, my question really is, it's nice to say, please bring people on board as your advisory board, bring people on board as your statutory board members, and make sure you bring the right quality of people. This is me. I'm a business leader. Maybe I left my 9-to-5 job. I'm trying to start up. How do I attract? What would I, maybe it's a bit related to what Nike just talked about in key man risk. How do I attract the right kind of people? What should I put in place that will make people want to join me? That's number one. Number two, as a business leader that wants to give back, I'm willing to serve on company boards. But the real question is, I'm not involved in the day-to-day running. It's one thing for me to come and sit on the board and say, please do this, please do that. The minute my back is on, the person may do something else. And you just said it, that being on a statutory board has its own legal implication. There are responsibilities. And so how do I also manage my own risk as a board member?
Okay, thank you, Jumoke. Let me start by saying that to attract, the right set of people to the board, I think it starts from how you communicate your vision. It's very important that they buy into what you are building or what your organization is all about. I believe that future-focused, result-driven, accomplished individuals will want their name close to success. So if you are able to communicate, appropriately what your vision is, and then, like we say in local parlance, you show receipts of what you've done, in the past, building, through the years to where you are. I believe it's going to be a good way for you to attract people who would want to buy into what you do and also support you, in doing that. So also, when we talk about your liabilities or possible exposures as a member of the board, yes, the law expects a director to act with proper skill, care, and also ensure that, all directors' responsibilities are carried out. But let me give you a very practical example. Every meeting of the board is supposed to have a minute. A director who attends a meeting should have access to the minutes, should read through that minute, and ensure that everything that was said, discussed, approved, resolved was properly documented at the meeting, right? And then you have the duty to ensure that you request for updates with respect to action points from that meeting. That gives you comfort as a director because you can trace where we were, where we are now, and then where we're going to. And besides, additionally, the law expects, or the law grants a director the powers to call for individual advisory. So say, for instance, the financials of the company has been presented and directors are meant to deliberate on it, and you are seeing things that are not looking like it. The law allows you to actually make, request for an individual, review of that by someone who you trust or by an agency, a company, and then they give you a report that you would go through personally, raise the necessary questions, and then put it, before management or the auditors, as the case may be. So there are actually rooms within the ambit of the law that would, if you explore them, that would give you comfort to know, that the company is doing what they are meant to do, and then it reduces your risk. And let me also say that the law does not expect every decision of the board to be flawless, so long as the processes are followed. Let me give a practical instance. A company wanted to acquire a very large expanse of land on the current coastal road, that they are, constructing. They did the proper due diligence. They got lawyers, they got surveyors, they got everybody, and then everything went well, looked good. And even they had to write to Lagos State to ensure that it's not within, the encroachment, blah, blah, blah. Lagos State wrote to them to say, you are fine, you can purchase. Few months or few years down the line, they changed the alignment of the coastal road and it ran through their very land. So there is really nothing you can do about that. Yes, it's a risk, it's a liability that has occurred, but the question will be, what was the process you went through to take that decision? Did you take did you do the proper thing? Once you did that, I don't think, anybody would hold you personally or corporately responsible for that. So I think that would be my response to that question.
Thank you. I think wants to chime in.
Yes. I just want to chime in a bit. Thank you, Shina. And thank you for that summary on how to manage your risk as a board member and all that. I think if I want to summarize everything you said, my one word that I'll say is be engaged. Please don't join a board for prestige. Don't just assume, so that I'll say I'm on the board of so and so. You need to be engaged. And Shina has already told us you are protected. And when he said that you can ask for third-party advice, it's at the expense of the company. You are not the one paying for it. It's at the expense of the company. So you can't ask for that. I think I'll just add two things to what he has said. One, find out, pay attention to how the company manages their own risk and their compliance process. Because if you're on the board, then at least understand how they manage compliance. Let them be able to report to you so that at least you don't run foul of the law, right? And you're on the board and you're not aware of what they're doing with regards to compliance and risk management and all that. Please make sure that you are aware, seek assurance, use the auditors, both internal and external. What I've found is that some board members they're not really interested they're only interested in the external auditors reports. Remember that your external auditors reports come in at specific time, maybe 1 year, they give you reasonable assurance, right? But you have an internal auditor there inside the company. Ask questions, be interested in their reports. It's very important for you. It protects you because then they are able to provide assurance on how the company manages risk. And finally, please know your limits. Know what you know and what you don't know. so that you can get help for what you don't know. And you can shout. You know, sometimes you can shout, and let that, if you are shouting, let it be documented in the minutes. So don't just keep quiet. I'm like, okay, everybody, you know, this that people railroad you into one decision. If you're really not comfortable with it, you should also shout. Thank you. I just thought I'll add those 2 points.
Interesting conversations. If I were to deep dive into some of these things, we would not finish on time. But I want to digress a little bit. And my digression has to do with this conversation around compliance. And, you know, I keep hearing this thing about ignorance is not an excuse in law. And we're beginning to get into an environment where regulatory compliance is becoming more and more top of mind. I mean, we've had the Nigerian Tax Act come out. Everybody's running in different directions. We're seeing industry bills being passed. And sometimes, as business leaders, we know about our industry bills, and sometimes we don't really know, and we just continue as usual. The real question is, how does a business, what should a business leader do today in the regulatory environment that we find ourselves? How do you make sure that you're not exposed, whether it is tax compliance, whether it is, you know, other forms of regulatory compliance? What should you do? That's on one hand. Now, there is also that presumption or assumption that every business has an internal auditor. Many businesses do not have internal auditors. They do not have compliance officers. How do you stay nimble and yet cover some of these things? Let's be practical.
Okay, let me quickly jump in there. I know Nika would have a lot to say here, but let me say that no, for any industry you work in, say for instance it's a regulated one and the license is required, you don't have a business in that industry if you cannot comply, because your license will be taken away. That's the long story. There's no, once they've given you warnings once, twice, at the end of, you have no license, and then you have no business. So I think you need to work that from the beginning. So I want to operate in a SEC regulated environment. SEC requires that you must have sponsored individuals. SEC expects that sponsored individuals must be people of certain category and they must have A, B, and C. If you don't have that, you don't even have a license. SEC expects you to render returns on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, annual basis. You must comply. So you work it into your business model to ensure compliance. You know, these days there are so many things we can do with technology, you know, to make it faster and easier, so long as within, you know, the scope of the work. So to a large extent, I believe you don't have a business if you are not, you know, complying, because whatever you have is going to be short-lived. So you need to find a way within your system to ensure that compliance is, you know, worked into, you know, whatever it is, you know, that you are doing. So it's very important. In fact, it's mandatory. It's not optional. You can't run a microfinance bank, you know, regulated by CBN. They've asked you to comply with new capital requirements. You fall short. You don't have a license. You don't have a bank anymore. You just go back home and start maybe money lenders, you know, business. That's just, you know, how, you know, I see it. So you just, you know, need to ensure that you comply to stay, you know, in business. I understand the fact that sometimes, you know, the cost of compliance, you know, may be a challenge, but I think working it into the business model, you can find, you know, a way how you engage people, you work your cash flow to be able to pay. And then if you need to train people internally, you know, to render all these regulations, you just find a way. Otherwise, you really don't have any business.
That is pretty brutal, but point well taken. Nike, what are your thoughts? How can a business leader ensure? Because it looks like this, if I'm to coin this year, this is the year that you must make the transition to put in place a framework. So how does a business do this in practical terms and the cost is not prohibitive?
Okay, maybe just add one thing. When Shina was talking about not having business, the thought that came to my mind is your license to operate. So if you don't have compliance in place, then there's no point. Then you don't have the opportunity, you don't have the license to operate anyways. So you don't have a business. So how can we be practical about it? It's important to be practical. Get help. Shina mentioned the fact that you can't build it into your business model. So get help. And based on your size, your complexity, you can get help. There's help everywhere. As you grow, then maybe the kind of help that you get would now differ. So get help. There are partners that you can work with. And then you have no business going into a business that you don't understand what the regulator requires for that business. So you need to have done your research well. And that's also, so I'm back to risk management again, because I need to understand it very well to be able to go ahead. And so and then what I'm talking about getting help is as things begin to evolve, because of the kind of complex environment that we operate in, right? So let me give an example of some big companies. What some big companies would do is they would have a team that is monitoring the regulatory landscape. That is a big company, right? Monitor, and that's one area in terms of policies and all that. You don't have to have that, right? There can be someone within your team that is the person's responsibility. Just checking compliance, are we doing the right things? Or you can outsource. These days, outsourcing has become so easy. You find companies that their focus, their business is compliance. And so the cost of outsourcing has come down significantly because that's their own business. So it's their business for them to look at, okay, this industry, what are the things you need to comply with and how that. So you can leverage on that as well to be able to do compliance. But that you will not do it is not an option, right? Look at tax. And interesting thing is that with topical issues like this, a lot of people talk about it. There are several webinars and all that. My advice to you is that for your own specific business, get advice tailored to your business. And you don't have to blow the bank to be able to do that. Then let's now talk about audits, having an internal audit function, because I'm very passionate about this. I'm very, very passionate about this aspect, and a lot of people say no, we don't need it. It's a what's the word that people use then? That is a cost function or something like that. That the only thing that they do is generate cost for the business. Can you still hear me? Just to make sure that my network is So it's a function that just it's a function that just generates cost for the business. My advice is your audit function is not just about audit. You just need someone to provide independent assurance to you. How you go about setting that up, you can be creative about it. So you can get someone to come in from time to time to provide assurance to you.
I'm not sure whether this is me or Nike. Now I cannot hear her.
I think it's our end.
Oh, no. Okay, let's hope that she gets in shortly. Whilst we're waiting for her to come back, because that is a very important thing, because we don't want to speak all the big grammar. And then at the end of the day, we find out that people cannot implement. So that's an interesting conversation. But whilst we're waiting for Nike to join back, Shina, my thought process also dovetails to this conversation around people entering into contractual obligations that they never prepared to go into it. Sometimes it is because maybe a member of their team did something. How does a business leader make sure that people in their team understand all of these conversations? So for instance, they talk about legal risk crystallizing because maybe a team member sent a message to a contractor without realizing that has committed the business. Nick, I see you are back, but please just give us a minute. Let me just How do you make sure that your team members are also well schooled? What kind of framework can you put in place that ensures that the processes are followed and people don't inadvertently bring you into contractual agreements that you never intended, and that you yourself are not careless as well?
Okay, all right. I think policy will be able to, handle that. There has to be proper, policies in the organization that states, who can do what. And then it's not everybody that has, powers to bind an organization with respect to whatever it is they do. So I feel that where you have the proper policy in place, and then, capacity to contract is critical. So if you don't have capacity to contract, that contract is void, at the beginning. So if anybody, sends an email, that then wants to rope the company in, there are legal ways that we can quickly extinguish, such if it would harm, the company. And then I believe that if the proper policies are there, there's one thing for you to have policies. Another thing is disciplined implementation of that policy. You can have it, we have the books, you've ticked that, we have this policy, but how do you implement them? So I feel to a large extent, yes, policies should answer that question, but the disciplined implementation of that policy is also critical. So everybody within the organization knows that we don't just have it written, we've taken it off the shelf, and this is the culture, in terms of how we carry out our day-to-day contractually with third parties and even within, the organization. But like I said, the capacity to contract, if anything happens, the lawyers to the company should be able to advise properly, in terms of extinguishing, such claims when they come up.
Okay, thank you, Shina. As we begin to wind down, I want to go back to Nike so that she can finish her thought process. I would also want us to begin to think about emerging risks in the marketplace, things like artificial intelligence, digital conversations, and such likes. And I'm going to be using that to wrap up even in the next 15 minutes. If you still have questions, please feel free to chime in. Okay, back to you, Nike.
Okay, so I was speaking about assurance, because really that's what audit does for you. And just to add to what the conversation on policies and implementing the policies. So once you have the policies, you've implemented the policies, the third level is to get assurance that it's working the way you've put it in place. And that's what an audit department would also give to you. Right. And when I say an audit department, you don't need to have a full-blown department in your company. Tailor what you need to your size. If what you need is somebody that comes in every 6 months or every 3 quarters to give you an assurance on critical risk areas. So also you need to ask yourself, what are my critical risk areas? Then you can do that. But as you grow, because some people you find out, okay, they started with that, and they've grown to this big company, they still want to maintain that. As you grow, that's no longer enough. The Code of Corporate Governance for Nigeria also gives you some requirements of what you need to put in place in terms of getting assurance, your audit functions and all that. And the board also begins to ask questions, right? They want to know what your assurance function is like. So start based on where you are, right? But grow as your business grows, as the complexity changes and all that, then begin to grow. Don't stay in the same place. So you have some companies managing billions of dollars and all that, and you find out they just have one audit function with one person doing all the work, and that person is an officer. The person is at the lowest level in the company, and then you tell yourself you have an auditor. Should I just tell you the truth? You don't have an auditor. That's just wasting money. That person is not doing anything. He's not empowered to do the work. The person cannot tell you the truth, because the person is at such a level that the person really is like, okay, thank God, let me just end my pay for next month. So you are not getting the best out of it. If you cannot employ, then outsource. Thank you.
That if you cannot employ, then outsource. Somebody's just asked a question. Let me quickly go to this question before I talk about emerging risk. So in markets, Abdul Rauf says, in markets where informal trust networks often substitute for legal enforcement, how do you build governance structures that don't collapse the moment a key relationship breaks down? It looks like a trick question to me.
Yes. So I understand that, business people will say that your word should be your bond. You can have a deal over an handshake and all of that. Unfortunately, the courts do not interpret handshakes. So even even if that is the start of the whole arrangement, there needs to be documents that covers your understanding. Because you guys agree informally doesn't mean that you cannot document them formally. Just something. And this happens where business owners cannot differentiate between themselves as individuals and the company. Corporate law says that the company is an entity on its own. It has perpetual succession, different from the owners of the company. So if the informal arrangement is between you as an individual owner of the company and that third party, you may choose not to document it. But if it's with the company, I feel it's maybe you use your policies as the requirement, or find an explanation to the person you are dealing with. But I think you need to find a way around it to document it, so that if at all there are disputes in future, you will have something to say that, but this is what we agreed. And then that way you can resolve. You may even be able to resolve amicably if it's in white and black, and anybody says that if I pull this too long, I'm going to be on the losing side. You understand? And then that may even be the reason why you can sit around the table and then talk it over. So please don't do business over WhatsApp voice notes. Ensure that you document as much as possible. Thank you.
Oh, Nika, do you want to chime in at all? Just for me is that if it's not documented, it does not exist. It's just very simple. If it is not documented, because you don't want to expose yourself to unnecessary risks, right? And if I like to say that the business partner that wants my best interest and also wants to maintain his own best interests also should be happy to document, right? And yes, and you need to state what you stand for. Yes, there are clients where you be like, okay, we just want to be informal trust, but we can't put our governance in place, and we expect that people would understand that. So please take that line. If it's not documented, it does not exist. Don't fall into the trap of just talking about things. Yeah.
There's something that someone very close to me used to say. He would say things like, you start informal, but people end up formal. So don't be the one that is caught in the middle of informality. Make sure that, yes, the formality is the baseline. Then you can layer your informality on top of the formality if you want. I mean, to make sure to oil your relationship. So there are some key risks that have also emerged because of the way we do business today. Case in point, artificial intelligence, digitization. How does a business, what are the risks that I'm exposed to as a business owner when you talk about issue of doing transactions digitally? How do I also ensure that I backstop those risks from crystallizing on me? We'll just take a touch on it briefly and move on to one or two other emerging issues as we wrap up.
Okay. Okay. Nika.
No, you can go ahead. Shina is fine.
Okay.
It's
so
fine.
I think, given the emerging trends, everything we're going digital. People sign contracts electronically. We collect data, of clients, customers, financials are even, done. So I don't think we can run away from the fact that we are going to do things digitally. However, the risks are obvious. Say, for instance, the new CAC, CAMA 2020, allows for electronic signature. And then it means that if anybody lays their hands on your signature and signs a document that is meant, for you to sign, but you would only sign it after you've properly reviewed it, but they placed that signature on it. Without further proof, it will be assumed that you signed that document. And if there are risks, that lie in the execution of that document, it means that you would have to bear, those risks. That said, when disputes arise, then you could go in forensic, you could then go ahead to distinguish, no, this is not the look-alike of my signature, and you can, settle that. But definitely this risk exists. And the only thing I feel we need to do as a people, as organizations, as business owners, is to be aware that this risk exists. And within your internal structures, you have to build, systems around mitigating this risk. That before now, we don't have, even now, before now, board meetings have to be physical. So you have to choose a date, venue, and all of that. But now, board meetings can be anywhere. You can join virtually. With AI, people clone people and then assume that they join meetings. And then when they would take screenshots of that to prove that you attended this meeting and we decided this at that meeting. So how do you go about all of this? So I feel that we cannot run from this, but within your internal structures, identify that this risk exists and then have mitigating factors. Say, for instance, nobody signs a document, electronical, physical, without A, B, C, and D. Say, if I have to sign a document electronically, I would have an hard copy of that document in a file in my office. So there's no way you would say I signed the document and the document is not in my file. So if it's not in my file, that means, so you can have, systems and policies within, your organization that would mitigate those risks. We cannot run from AI. We cannot run from digitization. It's just, us, like Nika would always say, mitigate the risk within your organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Shina. Nika, you were going to also say one or two things as well.
Yes. I think that Shina has called out quite a number of some of those risks in terms of data privacy, in terms of accuracy of the data, in terms of data protection itself, in terms of the quality of the data itself. So different things, and even making sure that you have the accurate data in terms of signature. So I would just try and add a bit in terms of how do you provide a framework to manage this risk. So the first thing I would say is that you need to define clear accountability with regards to AI and digitalization. And when I say accountability, there has to be someone saying that, okay, we will use this tool, we will not use this tool. You need to be clear, first of all. And the reason we're using this tool is this. So you find that in some companies, you cannot use ChatGPT on their system. In some other companies, they have the paid version of Gemini or Copilot. So so there has to be an accountability in terms of who owns the outcome, who helps you to make the decision. And that can be you as a founder, right? Or it can be someone else, it can be your operations, someone, but let that be clear, first of all. Then secondly, please, I know there's AI and AI is good and AI is perfect and AI is, I use AI a lot. Have human oversight. Yeah. You cannot get rid of human beings. Get someone that validates whatever results AI gives you. Have human oversight. There has to be human being. I will give an example, and this example is very clear. I'm sure a lot of us have seen it. We asked AI that, okay, I want to go to the car wash with my car. I want to go to the car wash to wash my car. It's about 5 minutes away. Should I drive there or should I work there? AI answered, it is better for you to work there.
You wash the car.
Then how do you wash the car? So you need human beings in place. So please don't just take it like that. Number 3, it's clearly related to number 2. You need to have a way to validate whatever model that AI gives you. So you need to validate, how does it come to this decision? Understand it. And yes, there are algorithms and all that. So you need to have a way to validate how those things happen. So does it think about this to do this, to do this? Please find a way to do it before you use it in your business. And then we talk about the final ones, talk about your data governance, who has access to my signature, who has access to this and all that. How do I protect from cybersecurity and all that? The final one is that please allow for people to challenge you and allow for transparency. Allow for people to challenge whatever thought is coming into mind with regards to that AI that you want to implement. Let people just challenge. You know, I like the Chinese 10th man rule, that if 9 people are agreeing to one thing, one person would deliberately oppose that decision and will argue his life out on why you should not go with that decision. So that way, you'd have looked at both ends. So allow people to challenge whatever it is that you're doing with regards to AI. So put this model in place. It's very simple. Governance, human oversight, test the model, and then make sure that you're able to challenge. I just thought I would add that for us. So in whatever context you're running your business, you can manage those 4 areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikki and Shina. Interesting stuff. Afiz has asked a question. I'm going to read it out, and then I also see another question from Abdurrauf. Afiz says, how can risk managers strike a balance between enabling business growth and enforcing controls, especially in fast-growing but unstable markets?
Very interesting question. And you know, if funny enough, this question comes up a lot. And for me, I would say it starts with the mindset. And it starts with you understanding that risk management is not a blocker, it's a value addition, right? And it's also in saying that putting in controls in place, I will not use sledgehammer to kill an ant. So my control is within a context. It's within a context. It's important. It has to be within a business context. Identifying my risk is within a context. So if that context needs to, and then as we do that, we need to ask ourselves, what's the cost benefit analysis? You know, I've seen instances where I would come as a risk person. I'll tell you these are the risk, and I'll still advise you to accept the risk. That's why in risk management, we have what we choose to accept this risk. It just means that I've considered it, looking at the costs, looking at the implications. My business has enough shock to be able to go ahead, right? So that's the balance, really. And most times what I find out is that the balance is just that sign of caution that the risk person is telling you. But as entrepreneurs, I just want to push it, don't push it without thinking deep. We're not, and it doesn't stop speed. The only thing is that we enable speed with confidence. It's not just speed alone. It's confidence, thinking about that. I've thought about what can go wrong. I've put the controls in place. I choose, you know, I like this in local, with my full chest to take on this risk, knowing that this is what will happen. So that, you know, that's the balance. So it's just that pause. That pause can save you millions of naira or millions of dollars. So that's what I will add to that. So, you know, it changed the mindset, let people work faster, consider what can go wrong, and then make a decision based on that.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me quickly ask this last question, which is from Abdurrauf. He says, how can one make governance decisions around assets? Sorry, there are two questions actually. One says, when your clients are informal buyers, no procurement department, no legal department, no legal team, how do you create enforceable structures around scope and payment without killing the relationship or the deal? Right? I don't know if you want to take a quick stab at that. Shina.
Okay, so I think Abdurraouf's concern is maintaining the relationship while you still do business, and then on the other side you have some form of structures in place. I think that from a legal perspective, like I said, you said it was too tough. Courts would only interpret documents which are evidence, but I also know that as business people, you need this people to grow your business. You need to sell, you need all of that. So I believe that there are ways you can incorporate these things into the conversations. Oh, sorry, our company, this is how we try to, so that you can find a story to give them, but first of all, I appreciate the fact that that these things are important, but you also want to ensure that the relationship is maintained. So in building that relationship with those customers, if they are there, you can actually have one pager where everything is documented. You only need to sign maybe a standard form contract where it's just signing, just something to keep records of whatever it is you are dealing with those people. And because there are no legal team, no procurement, I know that it's only important for you to have records. The business may not be at a point where they can afford to set up all of these teams. However, ensure that there are documentation. It doesn't have to be a typed one. It can be handwritten, so long as it is documents signed by parties. It's still something that shows the relationship between the parties. And when the business grows to a point where you can engage the service of an external solicitor, you can have something documented. You don't have to go to the lawyer all the time. So when you have these patterns of transactions, you can just it's more like a form or something. They build it for you, and then the customers would already know, and then they are used to that system. And then you just explain to them, find a way, maybe for record keeping, for something, but that it's for you to build proper governance into your system. Let me say, for instance, we have a client, it's a financial institution. They give loans to people, and then they fail to build governance. They now have loan officers that go to those customers to collect, the repayment. By the time they discovered, loan officers have collected cash, failed to remit cash into the bank. The banks they were writing to the customer, you are in default, you are this, you are that. By the time the customer showed us evidence of the money they've paid to loan officers, the bank could not do anything, right? So the bank now had to run after the loan officer. So imagine if you have a system, for every customer knows that if I pay this, I sign this. If I pay this, I sign this, and then it goes to, it may be another level in the bank. All of these issues will not arise. So it's very important. You just need to find a way to work with your customers to ensure that you have these records. It may not be necessary for now, it may be in the future. This bank I'm talking about, the loan officers had left the bank by the time we realized. So we were now running after them as ex-employee of the bank. So, and it was easy. It was easy because the customer had something that they signed that they had given money out.
Interesting stuff. Unfortunately, time is far gone. I will take one last question from to Rauf, and then I will take final comments from both of you. He says, how can one make governance decisions around assets and operations in environments where regulation can change faster than one's compliance capacity? Is there a framework for that, or is it always reactive? And once we're done taking this, we would just make final comments. Nika, do you want to go first?
Okay, sure. So basically, this is our reality in Nigeria. I'm not sure it's something that is new to us. Regulations change. You wake up one morning and there's something that's changed, or you find out there's one regulation that was signed and put under somebody's desk somewhere, and then you find out that it's applicable to you and all that. So it's a reality and all that. So it's important for us to have considered it, right? So, and then put some controls in place. But one framework that I want to advise really is, first of all, the ones that you are aware of, the ones that you have control over, have a process in place to ensure that you comply with that. Then secondly, I think I mentioned this when I started, as you begin to grow and all that, you also need to learn, you need to have a way to scout. You need to have a way to scout what's going on. I mentioned that I worked for a company. I was a consultant then, and what they would typically do, they can afford it. So what they would typically do is they have somebody that goes to National Assembly from time to time to check what they're even discussing. But that's the next level, to check what they're discussing and how it can affect them, right? So that's one level, but you may not be able to do that at this level. So what I would say is that to scouts, listen to news, listen to different things about what's going on around you. You cannot operate in Nigeria with your head under somewhere, not finding out what's happening, not listening to news about your industry and all that. From there, you begin to hear what is happening in terms of regulations and all that. But the first thing is that the one that you're even aware of, there are some that they've been there. Do your due diligence, the ones that are not new, because what you find out is that most people, even the ones that is there, they don't comply. Talk less of the one that comes in tomorrow. So the one that is there, first of all, is your license to operate. Make sure that you comply fully, and then you can now start looking for how mechanisms to hear what is coming on and all that. Ideally, and they try really look at the tax law. They would give you some time that this will become applicable in a particular time. They will typically, ideally, they will do that. Look at FRC, and also, when there's a new IFRS or something, you typically get time to say, okay, this will become applicable in this. So if your ears are to the ground, you will hear about it and all that. So that would be my advice. I don't know if Shina will just add one or two things from the legal aspect of this.
Okay.
Shina. Yes. Okay. So essentially, what we do for companies that we work for is that we monitor regulations, and then when their regulations affect their business, we send newsletters to them to let them know that this is a regulation you need to comply with. This is how it affects your business. While I understand that it may not be all companies that may be able to afford that now, but just like Nika said, you need to be aware of your industry and the frameworks that govern you, and then you work that into what you do on a day-to-day. But if you can afford it, you can have some regulatory watchers, as I will call them, to do that and update you from time to time.
Thank you so much. Time is far gone. I would say that, do you have a 60 seconds parting comment for our audience this afternoon? You've done such brilliantly well. But there may be still one or two things on your mind that you think businesses can benefit from. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I will. Okay, I would say that I understand the tough environment we operate in Nigeria. I understand very well because I'm also in the environment. So I know that regulations exist and then we are meant to comply. But there's a trend that Nigerian businesses are used to. We casualize a lot of things. We try to, just like some of the questions we responded to, we try to, reach agreements via handshakes. We believe that some people even consult ChatGPT to draft contracts and then they send to people to review for them. I believe that there are proper ways of, doing things. And as a business, I want to advise that we try as much as possible to grow our business with the future in mind. You understand? The things that you walk into the foundations of the business would make it, solid. We talked about governance, we talked about risk management to a large extent. We even talked about, legal, related risk. These things exist. We cannot run from them. But how do you as a business try, to walk around all of this and ensure you are afloat? Just like we're talking about you not complying with regulatory requirements, you don't have a license, you don't have a business. So I think we need to grow the consciousness of doing things by the books. And then where there are challenges, there are ways you can walk around it. Let me give an instance. We have a client who wanted to launch a certain fund, and then SEC had to SEC, of course, regulates the environment. They had challenges with, meeting requirements based on the regulations of SEC. They were able to engage, and then SEC gave them waivers based on the fact that, they are at the stage that they were, and then monitored their growth. So things are possible if you engage. So, but you need to be able to first identify that these things exist. You'll be surprised the number of businesses that do not know the laws or the frameworks that govern their industry. You will be surprised. Even the basic comma, people would basically register companies and they start doing business. There are things, post-incorporation requirements that the law expects you to fulfill. And at the time when it will become mandatory, you would have to pay penalties for, late filings, non-compliance, and all of that. So let's try as much as possible, to get knowledge around the business that we do, and then see the business grow from, one level to another. I wish us all well as we grow our business. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shina. Very, very well said. Nike, over to you.
Okay, I think Shina has done a lot of justice to some of the advice and all that as we run our business. I think just to add one or two things for me is, for your business, start your business, do your business with legacy and growth in mind, right? Don't just do it for today. Think about where you want to be tomorrow. And as you begin to think about that, issues like governance, issues like risk management, issues like assurance now come into place. And I think my advice is, you don't have to do it exactly the same way another company is doing it. There's a bespoke, fit for purpose way you can do governance. There's a bespoke, fit for purpose way you can do your risk management. There's a way you can do your assurance. Just find that way, get help to do it. There are several companies that are able to help you with that. This masterclass, I think, is being organized by Sector Advisory. You can get advice from businesses, from helpers, right? Shina has also spoken about people that are his clients and they come to him. You can get advice to build a framework that works for your business right now. And then as you begin to grow, then you begin to tailor it, you begin to grow it, expand. So we put the landmarks in place, we put those poles in place. But as the business begins to grow, as the business context changes, then we are also flexible enough to change and grow with that. So that's what my advice would be for everyone, especially if you want to build a sustainable business, especially you want to build a globally competitive business. You don't just want something that you build today and then tomorrow it's gone. You want something that you can build and it can stand anywhere in Africa and anywhere in the world. So there's a requirement for you to consider governance, to consider risk management, to consider assurance that fits your own narrative as a business. Thank you.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so, so much. I could almost go on and on and on. Please, can we give it up to this, our panelists? It's been an exciting conversation. Even I am thinking of the different things that I need to go back and reevaluate in my business. So well done. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate you both. And thank you everyone for taking time out of this, your very busy morning. We respect your time. Our hard stop is 11:30. Please enjoy the rest of your Saturday. And God bless you all. Thank you. Bye.